Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Leanne Scotto Adams. I'm the Executive Director of Strategic National Arts Alumni Project. This is our first SNAAP Chat, so we hope the first of many to come, where we invite researchers to come and speak to you all during a lunch break. We'll keep it short. We'll have some time at the end for questions. I am here with my colleagues, Dr. Christian Folk. He's the Assistant Director of Research Services for SNAP. Joanna Veronkovich, she is our Senior Research Fellow and Research Director. And then Angie Miller, Dr. Angie Miller is here as well. And our SNAP Board Chair, Doug Dempster at UT Austin. UT Austin generously hosts our organization, so we're happy to have him here as well. And I'm going to hand things over to Christian, and he's going to introduce our speaker. Thanks so much.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today for our very first Snap Chat. We're really thrilled to launch this new series. And we hope to, deepen your understanding and kind of spark new ideas through actual research. So we will have Dr. Motlani's presentation first, and then we'll have some time for Q&A after. And I'll just give a brief introduction of Dr. Motlani. So, Dr. Aisha Motlani is a creative workforce research specialist at the Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative. She leads the Illinois Creative Workforce Partnership using qualitative and quantitative methods to explore the intersections between artistic labor, education, workforce development, government policy, and the social and economic impacts of the arts. Dr. Motlani has a background in the arts and humanities, and her research has been funded by the American Council of Learned Societies, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the American Association of University Women. She holds a PhD in art history from Northwestern University and a bachelor's degree in architecture from the University of Cambridge, England. So her research that she'll be presenting on today has already been published as a data brief on the SNAP website, which I will link to in the chat. And we are ready to get started. So please welcome Dr. Motlani.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm very excited to be here and presenting the first report from my Branching Out series. So I'm going to go ahead and share that presentation. And yeah, are we good? Can everybody see that? Fantastic. Okay, so I'd like to start. So I'm talking today about the first report from the Branching Out series, but I'd like to, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Illinois Creative Workforce Partnership that I'm leading. So this is a very sort of unique partnership between the Illinois Workforce and Education Research Collaborative, which researches education and workforce in Illinois. Discovery Partners Institute, which is a tech and workforce innovation hub associated with the University of Illinois. Arts Alliance Illinois, which is a leading state's arts advocacy organization, and the art schools of University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and University of Illinois Chicago. And the partnership's goal is to use research to identify ways in which Illinois can better train, and employ its arts and culture workforce. So, the report I'm presenting on today is part of this Branching Out series, which uses interviews and surveys to examine the career pathways of artists and arts graduates in Illinois, or from Illinois, who are working in fields outside the arts. So the series arose from previous research, including my own, that uses data from the US Census Bureau to show that the majority of arts graduates have primary occupations outside the arts. We want to know how are artists entering and adapting to these fields, and why? And how does their creative training prepare them for these diverse occupations or industries? So the first report, the subject of today's presentation, we look at why artists and creatives transition to jobs outside the arts. And we examine the pull factors that have made these careers appealing to them and the push factors that have prompted artists and creatives to relinquish or postpone their plans to pursue full-time careers in the arts. We interviewed 40 people over a period of 10 weeks from 13 disciplines and 11 non-arts employment sectors. And the survey participants also each filled out a pre-interview survey. And participation in this study was open to any arts graduate or creative professional 18 years or older who was A, working in a non-arts job, B, had a background or training in the arts, and C, either currently worked in Illinois or had completed their training in Illinois. No one was excluded on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, disability, immigration status, education level, or artistic discipline, or the non-creative industry in which they worked. Artists and arts alumni could self-select for the study by responding to recruitment materials distributed on social media, and people were invited to participate via email and word of mouth. And in terms of participant information, I've got some tables up here to sort of help you get a sense of that. So our interview sample is broadly reflective of demographic trends we see in Illinois arts workforce. The majority identify as white, are aged between 25 and 44, and have at least a bachelor's degree in the arts. We have oversampled some groups, for example, women, but our previous research has shown that the majority of arts graduates in Illinois are women, and a larger proportion of women work in non-arts occupations than men. We also have oversampled, you can see here sort of the disciplines and non-art sectors. We've oversampled actors and musicians in this study, but again, our research has shown that music and theatre graduates are among the most likely to have primary jobs in non-arts fields. And this also aligns with national research that shows musicians and actors are among the most likely to work part-time in the arts and have arts jobs as their secondary occupation. And another quick participation slide showing you that we asked, would you work full-time in the arts if you could? And about three-quarters said yes, and one-quarter of our interview participants said no. And we asked, do you still maintain a creative practice? About two-thirds said yes, and one-third said no. So in terms of pull factors, during the interview, we asked participants to, what drew them to their present non-arts occupation, and their coded responses were used to determine pull factors, and these are shown here. As you can see, the most frequently cited pull factor that drew arts and culture workers to non-arts occupations were their non-arts jobs aligns with their interest and skills. That was number one. Number two was their work is well paid. And three, they have positive feelings towards their company or employer. Other highly rated pull factors were access to benefits, flexible work hours, including remote work. So the top rated for pull factor, job aligns with interests and skills, included people who feel that their work gives them a sense of purpose, enabling them to make a positive contribution to the world. For example, one participant that we spoke to says that the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as other events and experiences she had witnessed at the time, prompted her to leave her graduate program in art history and become a registered nurse because she wanted to make a difference. We also heard from a fine arts graduate that said working in HR at a university enabled her to advocate for others. She said, I've always liked being an advocate, and being in a position where I could help people feel supported and feel like the institution was invested in their success was important to me. Well-paid jobs was the second highest pull factor. One actor working for a tech company talked about how she realized she didn't need to adhere to the trope of the struggling artist and described how she valued having a job that allowed her to pay for amenities she might not otherwise be able to afford. She says, I have in-unit laundry, and that became a huge thing for me that I really desired. I wanted to have a washing machine. I wanted a central AC. These things became really important as I got older. And that's another thing, a lot of people that we spoke to, like, they talked about how over time they had realized that they need more security, that they need more money, that they need other things. In the pre-interview survey that each participant filled out, they were asked to describe the barriers that were preventing them from working full-time in the arts. During the interview, we used these responses as a guide to find out more about the push factors that prompted people to pursue careers beyond, beyond sort of arts occupations. So these interview and survey responses were combined and coded to determine push factors. And the results of this analysis are shown here. The top cited push factors were number one, low wages for arts and culture jobs. Uh, and negative experiences with the arts within the arts and culture industry was number two. And number three was the lack of long-term secure employment. So the fact that low wages is the top push factor is not surprising, given what we know about the creative workforce. Despite high levels of educational attainment, um, artists earn lower wages on average than other professionals from other occupational categories. And this is especially true of performing artists who made up a significant portion of our interview pool. For example, a designer whose work says that companies take advantage of the high number of arts graduates graduating each year, offering them low wages that they have no choice but to accept. He says it's like a race to the bottom for a lot of artists to get basically any full-time job. So they'll accept very low wages. And he, says where, software engineers have more leverage with their wages, whereas if you're a graphic designer just looking for that first full-time job, you'll sort of, likely to have to accept much lower pay. The fact that the shortage of long-term secure work is another top-rated push factor also comes as no surprise. Artists are 3 or 4 times more likely to be self-employed than other workers and are more likely to be mixed earners who work multiple jobs. Again, this is especially true of those in music and theatre. An opera singer we talked to, who works in finance, talked about the intense competition for soprano roles and asked, is it worth spending $400 on getting auditions, not even to hear back from them ever again? So this idea of like the risk and reward ratio here when there's so few opportunities. Our interviews showed also that job insecurities are compounded for those who are in the US on a work or study visa. For example, a fine artist working for a tech innovation hub described it as an extra layer of hardship, saying that that was another reason I had to look for work outside the art field because just looking at the numbers, it's impossible. Negative experiences within the arts and culture industries came second in sort of top-cited push factors. And this is surprising considering that, considering research that shows that arts workers are more satisfied than other workers despite their low pay. Or, do the job for the love of the arts rather than, and are not deterred by sort of pecuniary um, aspects. So some talked about toxic work environments and cultures in theatre and other industries. Some talked about long hours and the feeling of burnout and estrangement they felt from family and friends as a result. Others talked about the exploitative practices in the industry. For example, one actor and screenwriter who works in retail said that the shortage of roles for women that don't require nudity was a major push factor for her, a factor that's supported by research on ongoing exploitation of women within the industry despite high-profile social movements drawing attention to the issue. Another major thread in this theme was experience of unequal opportunity and lack of diversity in the arts. Those with performing arts backgrounds talked about the lack of diversity on operatic or theatre stages. One theatre and film graduate talks about the intense competition for roles for Black and plus size women. She says, a lot of times theatres will reuse the same people and they'll cast someone in multiple shows. So, you won't sort of get, it's very hard to get into that and to get those opportunities. Others talked about the fact that being from a low income background closed off many training and career development opportunities. because they simply could not afford them. One performer talks about having to pay to sing, referring to summer programs that provide important training and networking opportunities. She says, these summer programs are very expensive, and notes, I never thought these opportunities were available to me because I couldn't afford them. Our report also included themes that cut across push and pull factors. These include the impact of Chicago as a place of both challenge and opportunity for arts workers. You can read more about that in our report. But to summarize, artists and arts graduates talked about oh, sorry, talked about how the city is more affordable than LA and New York, and has great amenities, as well as serving as an important hub for traveling to other cities. But challenges that our participants cited included a shortage of agents in Chicago compared to New York or LA. Some participants also said that it's harder to have enough work or get paid enough from your artistic work to live on in Chicago than it is in other cities. And finally, our participants talked about the shortage of work opportunities, especially in film. Um, so those are some of the things you can read in more detail in the report. Another cross-cutting theme that was both a pull and push factor was the COVID-19 pandemic. For some, the health crisis helped to clarify their goals and opened up avenues they hadn't looked into before. One participant talked about how the shutdown of arts venues, as well as the impact on alternative sources of income, such as, teaching, opened up opportunities for him to teach himself about data management and analytics, and led to his transition to a career in this field. Others, however, talked about the dearth of contracts and the sudden absence of important networking opportunities during the crisis that had a detrimental impact on their creative careers and forced them to find careers that were more stable. It highlighted the insecurities of careers in the arts for them. So one opera singer working for a finance company described the pandemic and said highlighted the fact that illuminated the fact that there's no safety net for many artists in her industry. In the face of such a crisis, she says, what if there's a pandemic or you have to take time off or you want to have a baby and get married when you're 25 and you don't want to wait until your 30s? There isn't a plan for any of that. So the findings from the report contribute to efforts in recent scholarship and practice to redefine notions of what success means for artists and arts graduates beyond securing full-time work in the arts. Success can, as one participant put it, mean having in-unit laundry or being able to go out for dinner and not having to check your bank account afterwards. It might mean applying your skills to a wholly different sector. While the findings reinforce some existing ideas about the reasons why artists pursue non-arts work, it also challenges the assumptions that they only do so out of necessity rather than choice. As noted earlier, 1 in 4 of our participants said they would not work full-time in the arts if they could. Yet, a lot of the people we interviewed, 3 out of 4, said that they would work full time in the arts. And this makes a case for more artist supports like guaranteed income programs that are being piloted in cities like New York, and portable benefits for artists. The report also has implications for how we educate and train artists, encouraging educators to think more broadly about possible career pathways for artists and encouraging workforce development stakeholders to do a better job of including arts workers within employment initiatives. Finally, the report provides insights into the workforce beyond the arts. Given that more than half of our interview subjects were between 18 and 34 years of age, the findings in this report aligns with research that highlights the importance of mission alignment and personal values as factors that shape young people's career choices, not just money and stability. So as noted, this report is part of a series that uses this data set. Our second report will be coming out very soon, and examines the transferable skills that artists feel that they bring to diverse industries that they work And we will follow this up with a report that looks at supports and barriers facing artists in making transitions to non-arts careers. We also plan to conduct interviews of employers in order to gain their perspective on the transferable skills of artists and the factors they view as supports and barriers for those seeking to enter non-arts fields. For example, we're interested in gaining their perspective of what artists perceive as gatekeeping within various industries. We will begin recruiting for this study soon. Please reach out if anyone in the audience is an employer, or has any suggestions for who we might speak to. I can be reached by email. My email is on the slide here. So that's it. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Christian.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Motlani. Wonderful presentation. So we have a couple questions in the chat, and then we can take some questions from our participants. So I answered this in the chat, but I just want to make sure I got it right. Our board president, Doug Dempster, asked, does disciplines in your report refer to educational majors and degrees or employment fields, or kind of a mix of both, which is how I read it. Oh, you're muted.
Mute myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mix of both of those things. Absolutely. So, trying to think, I don't know if I put it in the table, how many of the people we interviewed actually had worked in the arts prior to transitioning to non-arts work. But yeah, a lot of the time it's both of those things.
Great. And then Christina asked, for this research, how are you defining arts jobs versus non-arts jobs?
That is a good question. So I'm defining arts jobs as those that kind of relate to the artistic disciplines, and require sort of working creatively in those disciplines. So it doesn't necessarily include someone with an arts background who's working as an administrator for an arts advocacy organization, right?
Yeah.
Or rather, it does. Did I say it does? So if you're working in, arts admin, or if you're working in a non-creative job, that's how I'm defining. I also, in terms of like what counts as an artistic discipline, I'm including sort of arts and culture jobs. So I did include art history within that, and museum jobs. So as you can see, there were 13 different disciplines represented there. So yeah, a somewhat broad definition, but in terms of what the non-arts jobs are, it's when you don't get to work in your field or creatively in that occupation.
Great. Thank you. All right. Any questions from our audience? You can raise your hand or unmute or Kim.
Thank you so much for this. This has been um, so enlightening. So a lot of this, I feel like we know in our bones, but seeing the data is so helpful. I wanted to ask if there's been any consideration for looking at different like city ecosystems. I know obviously your concentration has been in Illinois, but I'm curious if there might be interest at some point in branching out and looking at, are there some cities that are doing things differently? Are there some work economies where creative work, folks are staying in those careers longer and sort of looking at different areas in the US?
I think that's a very good suggestion. Like you said, because, I'm leading a partnership that focuses on Illinois, not even, on Chicago, but Illinois more broadly. I think that's a very good question. I think it would be very interesting to see how this looks in different cities. I mean, we hear mention by our interview participants a lot about how LA and New York are different to Chicago, but I'd be really interested in looking at other sort of, cities are often described as peer cities, like, Houston or San Francisco or, various other places, Minnesota. So I think that would be a really good point. And I think what you mentioned too about how, the career life, the longer sort of longitudinal kind of aspect of this, and research that has shown by Joanna and others about how artists sort of come in and out of self-employment, or come in, have different kinds of work patterns throughout their life. I think looking more closely at that is also an interesting thing. So yeah, definitely. I thank you for bringing that up, and I think that would be definitely an interesting further, to take this further.
Great, thank you. I saw someone else raise their hand earlier.
And there's another question in the chat, Christian.
Yeah, so Lisa in the chat asked if you used David Throsby's concentric circles model to define the core arts disciplines.
Yeah, I mean, I've referenced that model, and other stuff that I've done. I didn't, I think that notion, I think it's helpful in the sense that thinking about sort of, a graphic designer working in a non-arts industry, and I think, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't sort of focus on the specific disciplines that David Throsby outlines in that. But I think that is a helpful model for thinking about sort of different ways in which we measure and approach the arts workforce. It didn't necessarily serve as the basis for this one.
Great. And then Javon in the chat asked, were there any similarities or differences between individuals working in nonprofit arts jobs and for-profit arts entertainment companies?
I think that's a good question, but I did not. I would have loved to been able to sort of, have a sample that sort of included a big breadth, that included sort of for-profit arts industries and non-profits. But I must say that wasn't the case. I didn't have, to my memory, I did not interview anyone who was working in a for-profit arts and culture industry organization, or for an employer. So I think that I can't sort of speak to that comparison. I think that's definitely interesting to think about. There's so many ways in which it would be interesting to sort of drill down on and sample more, do more sort of careful sampling in order to understand sort of difference within disciplines, difference between for-profit and non-profit. I think that could be really interesting, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Great. And we have time for a couple more questions, either in the chat or otherwise.
I'll ask a question if no one else has one. I was interested in your one of the takeaways at the end about sort of redefining our notions of career success, and because that is really aligned with a lot of the work that SNAAP has done. And I'm also wondering if in the sort of what the interviewees were speaking to when they were talking about success, if they like directly spoke to what some of those other definitions should be, or if they spoke about how, if it was in any way related to sort of their identity as an artist. Because I know that when people major in the arts, sometimes they develop this sort of I'm an artist identity, and it's difficult, personally for them to move careers. But then there's also this sort of societal notion about what success looks like for people. So I just, any extra information you'd like to share about that, I would be really interested in hearing.
That's an excellent question too. All of these are very, very good questions. To your point about creative identity and success, so that's actually something I address somewhat in my next report, and plan to do a lot more in my final report, because I did hear what I heard from a lot of the people I interviewed was that exactly what you said is like this idea that if you don't have a full-time job in the arts, if you don't hustle and do, sort of work in sort of, jobs that, sort of work in the bartending or waitering or waitressing, and still, so that you can devote most of your time to pursuing that arts career. If you don't do that, a lot of people professed feeling like they're not a success, that they're a failure, that they're not trying hard enough, that they're not hustling enough. So that notion of success being, doing all you can, whatever it takes to continue pursuing that course. And yes, you really did get a sense of this notion of artistic identity being sort of bound up so much with their with who they are, with the people that we interviewed. And I think it was really illuminating that 39 out of 40 people that I interviewed still see themselves as creative, no matter what they're doing. They still see themselves as creatives. And the one person who didn't, um, as I was talking to her, she realized, yes, I do see myself as a creative still. So it's really interesting to think in that respect that creative identity remains to be a very important component of how they identify. And this notion of success, there's a notion like, the example I mentioned of the theatre graduate who says, like, I was tired of, having to worry about, being able to eat out. I was tired about, as all my friends who were working in different industries were able to do this and that, and I couldn't do that. So that I felt like I was not sort of fully developing, not becoming grown up. But on the same time, when the same people are in the orbit of their artists' friends or in the groups of, with other people who are still pursuing the craft, they feel, less of a success. They feel like a failure when compared to the, within that context. So I think that's a really interesting sort of position to explore more, like what, how success and failure can be defined by context. And even educators, like a lot of them talked about how the instructors would say, like, if there's anything else you can do beside being an actor, if there's anything else you even slightly want to do, then go for it, because this is going to be a real struggle, and this, a lot of them felt really sort of, looking back on that, felt that they were really sort of, that wasn't the right thing to say. But there's other ways in which their teachers could have defined different modes of success and different ways of still being an artist and being other things. So I think these are things, just in short, are very interesting aspects of this that I'd like to, that come out a little bit more in the next report, but certainly will be developed further in the final one. I hope that answered your question, or, something towards it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking forward to reading the upcoming reports as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then we'll do one last question. Patricia has a question.
Thanks. I was curious about it makes sense to focus on actors and musicians, but I was also wondering about dancers who seem to also be um, less likely to have full-time jobs within their respective arts discipline. And based on just briefly looking at the full report and the citations, I believe that with NASERC, they're really talking about the performing arts. So yes, both actors and musicians as well as dancers. And
Yeah,
I was just
absolutely.
curious about that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned actors and musicians because we did end up oversampling, but we did interview people who are also from the dance profession, and a lot of the same sort of issues coming up. You're absolutely right, that, again, the same sort of, a lot of the same sort of push and pull factors coming up. It was more a question in this report about the fact that, we only, in terms of who expressed interest in this study, who we were able to
Understood.
recruit for this study, were more actors and musicians were overrepresented. But yeah, absolutely. And in the report, I do quote some of the people from, some of the dancers, both in this report and in the next one. So
and
I
then
just, those are
thank you.
not represented in this presentation. So.
Thank you. And then somewhat related, I was just curious about I know that a lot of the census data only tracks uh, uh, one primary type of
Yeah.
occupation as well as a secondary occupation. And I'm wondering if you talked with these interviewees about third and fourth types of jobs that they might also have.
Yeah, I mean, that came up with some people that I spoke to. for example, I spoke to one person with an arts and theology background who was maintaining a creative practice, had a job in, for a nonprofit, but was also trying to develop a real estate career that would enable them to then, be able to rely fully on, be able to sort of fund creative, their creative work, more fully in the future. So that did, that did come up every now and then, but it wasn't sort of a major thread uh, throughout the interviews. But that's a good point. Yeah. We do have the CPS that looks at secondary occupations. The AC, the community survey data looks at the primary occupations, but yeah, oftentimes you have, and yeah, there were actually thinking of it, there were some people that I spoke to they had various different types of jobs. There was one person who was, who came from an arts, a dance, music, and theatre background who actually picked up all different kinds of jobs. She was actually trying to maintain more of an artistic career, so had different types of jobs that she worked in to support that in different industries, education, healthcare, being some of those.
Great. Well, thank you again, Dr. Motlani. This has been a really wonderful time this afternoon. Um, Leanne, any other parting words?
No, we have one last question in the chat, but Lisa, we'll connect you to Aisha directly and continue the conversation there. You can continue the conversation there. We're trying to keep these short within the half hour so folks can squeeze them in during a lunch break. So yeah, thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks, Christian, for hosting, and Dr. Motlani for presenting today. All of your great questions. We'll share the recording on our website. We plan to do that moving forward. And I think that's it. Thanks, everyone.
And
Thank you so much.
our next Snapchat will be next month in July, which we will be sending out on our mailing list, so you will have information about that.